I'm with political analyst Daniel Silke. Daniel, what are some of the bright spots for Africa's oil and gas industry, say within the next 5 years?
Well, the bright spots are probably more in gas than they are in oil, given the overall global consumption trends going forward for the next 20 years, which show that the oil market will be relatively flat. The needs for gas and indeed also for new forms of energy, precious metals and rare metals in particular, are going to be more in demand. From a natural gas perspective, I think there are reserves across the African continent, some of them realized, some of them not yet, that put Africa in a very strategic position globally should there be sufficient impetus on the basis of price and on the basis of a better regulatory environment to go ahead and forge new explorations in those particular markets. I get quite excited about that particular aspect, but the second key aspect really for me when it comes to Africa is the fact that there are still 2/3 of the continent, 600 million people plus, who are without access to power. And frankly, if this continent really wants to achieve what it has set itself out to do, which is improve the lives of people, which is to raise GDP growth rates and put resources into the pockets of its citizenship, it will have to provide at least some of that power, and it'll have to be done for domestic reasons rather than for pure profit reasons or for to please external investors.
Now, as we move towards a cleaner, lower carbon environment, globally speaking, where exactly does Africa stand? We know, for example, that South Africa has made some moves in regards to its a renewable energy space, but the rest of Africa seems to be lagging behind. What do you think it will take, or what is the reason or the challenges that you think governments are facing?
Yeah, I think we see, generally speaking, in the developing world lagging on this issue. For many developing countries, the priorities are not necessarily on renewables. There's a cost factor, which I think is fast becoming less of a factor as costs do drop in general. I think for the moment, African countries themselves really need to understand a global environment and understand aspects of climate change, which are affecting both economies, they are affecting the movement of people across the continent, and increasingly they are impacting directly on the livelihood of Africans. Climate change affects broad swathes of East Africa, West Africa, Southern Africa. We're experiencing it here in Cape Town at the moment, and renewables ultimately are going to become a lot more important. It's a matter of time, I think, before Africa fully embraces renewables, and the resources are here, whether it's wind, whether it's solar. The technology is also here, for that matter, on the continent, and there should be every good reason why Africa itself becomes a leader in implementing renewables, especially when it comes to the many billions who will need power over the next 50 to 100 years.
Do you see renewable energy as the future of Africa?
Well, I think it should be an absolute priority for the continent, along with, clearly, I mean, we have a mix of energy solutions. And energy solutions also wax and wane depending on price and depending on market conditions. So I think one has to be realistic in terms of the cost and profit factors involved in developing, exploring and implementing the variety of solutions that we have. But I would like to see public-private participation in particular, and also smaller private players becoming a lot more integrated into national grids, especially when it comes to the implementation of renewables. And I think that this should be a priority for most African countries who are able to implement. And I think less of in a sense, it's controversial, but less of a protectionist attitude towards the overall control of that energy grid needs to be implemented in order to encourage a much broader range of private entrepreneurs to enter the grid. The technology is now available globally. It's implemented in parts of the continent already, and there's no reason why a more liberalized approach to renewables in particular should not be part of the solution.
Daniel, let's leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.